Jess here. Welcome to our Facebook Live workshop on 5 mistakes you're making with your Etsy shop and how to fix them. So I wanted to put this little workshop together for you today. If you attend live, awesome. Please feel free to ask me any questions. If you are watching the replay, you can also ask questions. I'll still get notifications. So if you have something pop up that you want to ask me, please do feel free to do that. After the show, I will have some links in the description to tell you a little bit more. I'll probably mention some stuff throughout this workshop, so look for that as well. As you arrive, please say hello in the comments so I can see who you are and where you're from. Let me know where you're from. And I'd also love to know how long you've been on Etsy, or if you're on Etsy at all. And if you have any tips throughout this workshop or things that have worked for you, please do share them as well. I'd love to hear them. So I have my notes. Shall we get started? All right. So I'm going to go over those 5 things today that I mentioned, 5 little tips, things that I see people do over and over again, especially beginners. So if you've had an Etsy shop for quite a long time, this may not be very surprising to you, what I cover in this workshop. Chances are, if you have a successful Etsy shop already, you're doing these things right, but it never hurts to check, right? Hi, Jenny. Hi, Jacqueline. So before I start, actually, I should probably introduce myself because some of you might not know who I am. So my name's Jess and I have been running my own Etsy shop since 2008. In 2008, I started Ethereal, my jewelry brand, as a hobby. Just something on the side. I had a full-time business. I didn't really intend on making it a full-time business at the time, but during that first year or so, I learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes, some of which I'm going to talk about in this workshop. But since then, Ethereal became my full-time business in 2010 and has been ever since, and I've been self-employed ever since. And I've been helping makers just like you to improve your handmade businesses, get them started, help them grow since 2013 when I started Create and Thrive, which is my blog and podcast that helps people do just that. Hi, Lakshmi. Lovely to see you. All right. So the number one mistake I see new people make, and this is completely unsurprising. So if you're making this, don't feel bad, but it is not having enough listings in your shop. So when you start out, understandably, you're probably going to be starting with a small amount of products, and that's okay. But I encourage people who do want to really get their Etsy shops going to work really hard to fill them up as quickly as they possibly can. So one thing that happens is people they add maybe 5 or 10 products to their shop, and then they spend all of this time marketing, like getting on Instagram or Pinterest or whatever else, and wonder why their stuff's not selling. Sometimes it will. Sometimes you'll just have absolutely the right thing for the right person at the right time and they'll buy it. But generally speaking, when somebody comes along and sees a shop with only a couple of listings, they're not going to take you as seriously because they're going to think, oh, this person's just a beginner or a hobbyist or whatever. And there's no reason for them to know what stage of business you're at. So the more listings you can get in the shop, not only does it make you look more professional, it also obviously helps more people find you, because the more listings you have in your shop, the more you're going to pop up in search. So at the beginning of your business, really focus on that element. Focus on getting a nice, strong product line together and getting it in your shop. You hear a lot of people say that the magic number is 100. There is some truth to that. I know when I kind of went over that, things picked up, but don't feel like, oh my God, I don't have 100 products. My shop's never going to go anywhere, because that's false. You don't need 100 products. It's just a nice round number, that somebody picked out of the air at some stage. So it's not necessary, but it's a nice goal to shoot for if that's possible for your business. And it might not be. Your particular business might not have the capacity to make that many different products. But one thing you can do is, if you want to make your shop look a bit more full, is list your variations separately. Instead of having them in one listing and having like different colors to choose from, for example, list every single color or design option as a separate listing in your shop, and that will fill things up a little bit more quickly. Hi, Sarah. Oh, 40th pattern. Yes, good job. You're doing really well. Yeah, so make sure to get as many in there, do the variations separately. And another little trick is if you are unsure about which main photo to use, you can actually, as long as it's a reproducible product, so you can fulfill the order, list the same thing with different main images, different titles and tags. So you can actually test those sort of things off against each other. And that really helps to fill things up as well. Hi, Robin, lovely to see you. There is the possibility of going the opposite way, and that is having too many products in your shop. Now, I made this mistake in my first few years because I was just constantly designing new things and popping them up in the shop and, you know, just experimenting. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there came a point where I had, I think it was over 400 listings in my Etsy shop, which is just crazy. And a lot of that stuff was, you know, perhaps designs that weren't really in line with my business anymore. And I had to make the decision, well, am I going to keep all of these things or am I going to get rid of some of them? Hi, Kathy, lovely to see you. So I actually did this big cull and I took about 2/3 to 3/4 of the products out of my shop. And that was terrifying because you're like, what if, am I going to lose all this traffic? You know, I'm going to lose business. But the truth of the matter is most of the things I took out of my shop weren't selling anyway. So it just got rid of the clutter. It really clarified my branding. So my tagline is Silver Simplicity. And back then I had so many different designs and so many different materials, like different beads and stuff. And I just got rid of it all and went, okay, well, I'm Silver Simplicity, let's get back to basics. And so now my shop looks very coherent. Everything is in line with that. And that's something for you to aim for as well. But that's kind of a problem for people who've been in business for a while. But it's something to keep in mind as well. All right, so I guess the real key there is on that end, don't be afraid to get rid of things that aren't working. Give them a good amount of time, you know, and by a good amount of time, I think like at least 6 months, and tweak them and play with them. But if, you know, if they're not selling or you feel like they don't fit the ethos of your brand anymore, just get rid of them. And that's okay. You know, it happens to all of us is what I'm saying. Hello, Carol. Thank you for coming. All right. So number 2 is photography. You probably knew this was coming. I like to challenge people when I talk about this and I say, go to my shop and go look at my first few sales because the photos are terrible. They really are. I don't know why anybody bought anything from me, but I've learned a lot since then. So, you know, good photos are really the number one thing you need to focus on if you're selling online. I don't care how good your descriptions are or how good your titles and tags and SEO and marketing. That stuff can all be going, you know, you can be doing a really good job, but if your photos aren't on point, people won't buy your product because that's what really sells them on it. People who've had, you know, an online business for a while, there's a running joke that customers don't read the descriptions. And if you've been in business long enough, you'll see that this is, in a lot of cases, quite true. So you really need, the photos are what sells it. The photos are what brings people in when it catches their eye, and good photos from as many angles and in as many situations as makes sense for your product will really make the difference between someone clicking the buy button and not clicking the buy button. Oh, Jessica's just said, letting go of old stock was always hard, but so glad I have, as it is so refreshing. Yeah, I felt like just a weight lift off my shoulders when I got rid of all that old stuff. And, you know, sure, there's a bit of a sunk cost there, but it's just part of doing business. So you can, you know, you can try to sell them off, like do a big sale. Like I think I did like 30 or 50% off or something like that of those old designs. And I told people, I said, you've got a week, send it out to my mailing list, put it on social media. This stuff's all going. If you want to buy any of it, buy it now. And I moved it all to like one category in my Etsy shop and on my website as well. So say anything in this category is 50% off. It's going to be gone in a week's time. If you want it, buy now. So that's a nice way to actually get a few more sales coming through and to make it easy for your customers. All right, so photos. So yes, I used to use Flash. I used to have like horrible backgrounds. Oh my goodness. All of those things are big no-nos. And it took me, I would say it took me a few years, honestly, to get my photos to the point where I was really happy with them. And it took a lot of trial and error because I'm not a photographer, you know, I don't have a background in that. but I figured it out in the end, and I'm quite happy with how my photos are now. So don't be afraid to experiment with that, like to really try different things. If you want like help setting up a little photo studio, head on over to handmadebiztools.com. Is that the right URL? Yeah, sorry, handmadebiztoolkit.com. It's the one I have too many handmade URLs. Handmadebiztoolkit.com, and pop in your email and you'll get access to my Handmade Biz Toolkit for free. There's a whole bunch of downloadables, but one of them is a studio in a box, like how to actually build a little photography studio out of a box. And it's made by a professional photographer, so he put that together for us. So that's a nice little thing. Obviously, if you have bigger products, you need a staging area that you can use to take photos of your products. And things like, so at the moment, you probably can see the reflections in my glasses a little bit. I've got these studio lights, and they were like $50 on eBay, and they're an awesome investment. But if you have big products, especially, you can use them for small products as well, obviously. But that'll really help you get some nice photos, especially if you can't get natural light. Natural light is fantastic, but if it's not possible for a lot of us. So getting that sort of muted lighting makes all the difference. As you know, I look quite good right now because I'm like super lit. And the same goes for your products. You want to give them a lot of lighting to take away the shadows that they might have otherwise. So that's a really good tip. So filtered or ambient light. Another mistake I see a lot of people making is over styling their product photography. Now, the photos you make to share on like Instagram and stuff like that are not necessarily your product photos. They are often two different beasts. Now, that's not saying you can't share your product photos on Instagram, because absolutely do. But those pretty, really detailed, styled photos, they should not be your main image. They can be a backup image to give people a bit of a feel for your brand, but you need to make sure that your product is the star of the show. So you should have very little in the way of props and extraneous things in the photo. I've seen product photos where literally I don't know what the person's selling because they have too many things in the photo. So don't make that mistake. If you have styling, pare it back as far as you possibly can, right? And don't be afraid to keep it as simple as possible. I'm not a fan of white backgrounds, but that's a personal choice. I like to choose a background that actually reflects my brand. So my ethereal photos, a lot of them are on like a wood grain, because that kind of my branding is about being eco-friendly and simple and natural. So that feeds into my brand. Other photos are on kind of gray or bluish backgrounds. So those things can all be helpful. So it's basically thinking about what sort of background or situation is going to make your product stand out and have a wow factor. And that's what you want to do. If you have any questions about this, guys who are here live, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm happy to answer questions as we go. Another important thing is if you're taking photos freehand, they might look really good on the screen, but you're not going to know for sure if they're crisp until you put them on a big screen. So put them on your computer. So make sure to take heaps of photos. The beauty of digital, take as many as you want. So take lots and lots of photos. And then when you put them on the big screen, if you see that they are blurry or subpar, take them again. It's not worth putting up subpar photos. It just isn't. Don't waste your time. Go retake the photos until they're really good. And on the flip side of that, if you are just experimenting, do your best. Make sure you have good filtered light. Make sure you have a nice clear background. Make sure you take photos from lots of different angles. And I know on Etsy now you can add 10 photos, which is fantastic. You want a photo that shows the scale, shows the item being used, all of those sorts of things to really allow people to get a feel for it. They can't pick it up, they can't touch it, they can't feel the weight in their hand. You need to get that across to people through your photography, and that's the power of really good product photography. Okay. So the third thing is a lacking about page. Now, this is not necessarily a huge issue, but it is something that makes a big difference to your branding and your brand story. So, on Etsy, you have the ability to add photos, you can add a video, you can write lots of things. And another thing that I see people doing a lot, which I wish they wouldn't do, is they talk a lot about themselves. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and you should do that, but don't forget to talk about your customer on your about page. Tell them why this is for them. Tell them why your product is for them. Tell them why they will love it. So we talk a lot about benefits and features. So the features are this, this necklace is so long and it's made of this material. But in your about page, especially with your overall brand, talk about the benefits of your brand. If they buy from you, what are they contributing to? Are they being part of a story? Are they helping, in my case, eco-friendly? Are they helping make a difference to the planet? Whatever it might be, there's going to be some way that they're going to connect and talk to them and tell them why their stuff is right for them. Now, of course, your stuff is not going to be right for everybody. So don't be afraid to turn some people off by being honest about what your shop stands for. They're not your customers anyway, and that's okay. We're not marketing to everybody. So that's another thing to remember with your about page. Sarah, is there a good checklist for what to include in a good about page? I like checklists. Actually, I have a checklist like that in my Setup Shop course. So there is a whole lesson on this in that, and I talk about all the different elements to consider. A few things you want to, like I said, talk about the customer, tell them why they'll love your brand, why they will love your products. Tell them your origin story, like you're a superhero. Where did this come from? Where did the idea come from? Why do you do what you do? And a lot of makers are really good at that, so that's fantastic. Use the photos and use the video to really let people know what your brand is about. And if you don't want to be, on screen, your face, you don't have to. It's okay. Use your hands. Hands are a really good humanizer. So if you have a photo of your hands making the thing that you do, that's a really nice alternative to having a face photo if that's something you're not comfortable with. If you are comfortable with it, 100% have a really nice photo of you in there, because people connect with faces. We connect with other people. It's really powerful. So don't be afraid to do that. Hey Roz, lovely to see you as well. Okay, so let's see here. So behind the scenes photos are really great as well, showing your studio space, where you work, parts of your life, specifically that relate to your brand story. So whatever your brand is about, you don't have to show really personal stuff, but just images that reinforce the story of your brand that people can fall in love with and connect with. By doing this, by having a really good about page, it helps your ideal customer connect with you because they recognize themselves in your brand. They go, oh, this resonates with me. This looks like me. You'll hear people say that when they go clothes shopping or jewelry shopping. They're like, oh, this looks just like me. This is, that's because they recognize themselves in it. And that's one thing that you want to be helping them to do, is to recognize themselves in your brand. Buying something is not a logical decision. We think it is, but most of the time it's an emotional choice. So we buy something because it makes us feel a certain way about ourselves or about the world or whatever it might be. So this is another way to connect emotionally with your customers, which is really powerful. All right, the next one is lacking policies. Do you have good policies? Good, strong, detailed policies that cover any eventuality that you can think of? I hope so. If not, let's talk a bit about that. Policies are there for your protection, okay, to make sure that your customers are aware of the intricacies of your business, of the things that you're okay with, the things that you're not okay with. Obviously, you need to make sure that your policies are in line with the law. So wherever you are, go search for consumer law. In Australia, Australian consumer law, just Google that, it'll come up and you'll be able to see what the laws are around being someone who sells stuff. There's certain rules, like for example, you'll go into a lot of shops and they'll have, this item's on sale, there's no returns on a sale. That's actually illegal. They can't say that. You actually have to offer, I think it's a 30-day or something return on that sort of item. There are exceptions to that, so custom orders, for example. So get to know the consumer law of your country and use that as a basis of your policies as well. Another great thing to do is to basically stalk the policies of successful people in your niche. So if you make jewelry like I do, go look at really successful jewelry shops and go read their policies. The reason I say this is because chances are they've come up against a whole bunch of problems that you've never even thought of. And what happens as a business owner is that when you have a problem that crops up, you're like, oh, how can I avoid this in future? Let's put a policy together that helps me, protect me, and helps my customer understand what's okay and what's not. So I'll give you a story about this. When we started making wedding rings, a few of the people who bought from us in the beginning got their sizes wrong. And at first I was like, oh gosh, okay, send them back and I'll resize them for you. Not really thinking about it. But it's almost as much work to resize a ring as it is to make one. And I wasn't charging them anything. And after doing this 2 or 3 times, I was like, hang on a second. It's their mistake. They're making a mistake and I'm paying for it. This can't continue. I can't do this. So I had to come up with a policy, and I instituted a fee for resizing. And I also educated my customers. So what I did was I put together this big long blog post, which I now have as a page on my site, of how to get your ring size correct. So the process, and I actually explain how the process of sizing rings, like, because most people that have no idea, like, how do we come up with a ring size and how should they get their ring size and what not to do, the things that don't work. And then, okay, if we do all of this and we make your ring and it's still not right, here's the process to fix that, and it's going to cost you money. Guess what? People were a lot more careful about giving me the right size to start with when I put that policy in place, because they're the ones who have to wear the cost if they get it wrong. And that is actually in line with Australian consumer law. So it's really important to think about those sorts of things, have those policies in place, and make sure that you're educating your customers wherever you need to about those important things. And that's part of what you can do in your policies, is educate your customers. And if you have a problem that keeps cropping up, write a blog post about it, do a video about it, put it out there, and hopefully that will help stop it from happening in the future. But also, if it's in your policies, you can always refer to that and say, as per my policies. You're not making something up. You're not treating this customer differently to anyone else. Everybody gets the same treatment. And by the thing being in your policies, you can make sure that they know that to start with. So that's really important. An FAQ is nice too. Now on Etsy, they do have limits to the policy information these days. It used to be you just wrote your own. So what I do, because I have a lot more stuff that won't fit in there, is I just add them at the bottom in those extra sections. You can just add extra stuff. So put any extra policies in there that you want to put in there, and make sure that your customers are encouraged to read it. Again, a lot of them won't, and that's just the way it is. So it's really there as a backup for you to protect you when problems arise. All right. Okay, I think that's all on that. So the last one is descriptions. I think people are a lot better at this now than they used to be as a general rule. I'm not saying this problem happen quite as much as I used to, but it's still an issue. And that's, having descriptions that aren't detailed enough, that don't answer all the customers' questions. That's basically what you want to do in a description. Not only do you want to tell them about the product, but you want to answer any questions that they might come up in their head about this product, any objections they might have, or things that might stop them from clicking the buy button. You want to answer those things in your description as much as possible to reduce that sort of click away where they're like, oh, I don't know about this. One thing that doesn't really work very well is when you say contact me for blah. If they have to go through that extra step of contact, for example, this is one I see all the time, contact me for international prices to ship this thing to you. 95 to 99% of people won't bother. It's up to you to do the work to figure out the price for the shipping and just put it in the listing. That way they can just click the buy button and everybody's happy. So don't be afraid. I know it's a lot of work, but if you do the work, it'll result in more sales. And that's what we want, right? So when your customer stumbles across your Etsy shop, however they manage to get there, there's really two things that are going to make them click the buy button. One is the photos and the other is the description. All the other stuff will help them, like the policies will help them get clear on what's expected, and your about page will help them make a connection with you. But really, it's those two things that make them buy. So it is really your only shot to convince your customer to buy from you. So you need to make sure to get it right. Obviously, you have to consider things like search engine optimization in your description. So you want to make sure that the most relevant keywords are at the beginning, but don't write it for a computer. Don't write it for Google, write it for a human being. Make sure that you write proper sentences and that it all flows really nicely. But don't waste those first few lines being too airy-fairy about things. Make sure you're getting your descriptions in there. I'm just going to have a drink of my horrifically colored soda stream here. Looks so unnatural. My God. Well, it is. So there you go. All right. So tell them the benefits. So give them the keywords at the first part. Tell them some benefits. Why will they love this? How can they use it? What part will it play in their lives? How will it make them feel? All of those sorts of things can go in there. And then you list the features. How big is it? What material is it made of? Any care instructions? All of that sort of stuff goes in there as well. People, really want the answers to their questions. And one thing I've seen a lot of makers doing these days, because of the whole people don't read descriptions thing, is actually putting photos in their photo sequence that give people the really key points in a photo so they don't miss it. I do this myself for one of our products, the oxidized wedding rings that we sell. People who don't read the description don't necessarily realize that it doesn't last forever. It doesn't stay that way. It actually weathers off in time. And at the beginning, we had some issues with people who just didn't read. So what I did was I came up with a photo, and it has like a couple of photos that show the progression over time of what happens to the finish. So that way they can't say I didn't know, because there's a photo right there that shows you what happens. So if you have anything like that with your product where people might be a little bit confused or not understand something about it, putting it in a photo and describing it there can be a really good way of getting rid of any problems before they arise. I'm glad, Vanessa. I'm glad you're finding it helpful. That's awesome. So yes, emotion. I talked about that, what emotion is attached to it. Yes. All right. Awesome. So that's pretty much it, guys. Those 5 things, if you get them right, then that's when you start thinking about other stuff. So overarching all of this is the biggest mistake I see people make when they're starting out, is they get a lot of this wrong and they devote way too much time to marketing or their SEO or whatever without getting these fundamentals in place first, and then wonder why they're not selling anything. You need to have this stuff sorted. You need to have really good photos, good, strong descriptions, a great policy, a nice, clear about page that will help people connect with you. And you need to make sure that those things are all in place. And then that's when you really devote yourself to all the other stuff. And I know that can seem a little bit at first, because you want to make sales, right? You want to get the word out there. And of course you should. You should be spending some time on your marketing. But I really want to encourage you to spend that initial amount of time on this fundamental stuff and work at it. Go over it and over it until you get it nice and clear, till you have nice branding, everything works together, all the photos work together, your descriptions are clear, they have all the information people need, your policies are as clear as you can make them. Of course, you'll learn over time and add to them, and that's normal. But work hard to do all of these things first before you invest heaps of time on, Instagram or Facebook or Pinterest or whatever else. Because if you don't have stellar photos, great description, and all the rest of it, people might come to your shop, but they might not buy from your shop. And that's what you really want people to do. Sasha says, hi, I just really need to go over all of this again, getting bogged down with the daily making, looking forward to it, and lovely to see you again. Oh my goodness, I haven't seen you for ages. It's great. Yeah, so, and Sasha makes a really good point. This is not something you do once and forget about. I've just done this myself. We've just done a revamp of our own website, so ethereal.com, and I actually went through and redid all the descriptions for all my products, which is like 150 products. And it was pretty awful, I'll be honest. It's pretty boring and time consuming, but it's important because some of those descriptions I wrote like, 7-8 years ago, and they're just not up to par. They're not where they need to be. Of course, the next step will be then going and putting all those descriptions across into the Etsy shop, which I haven't done yet. So the Etsy shop still has kind of our old descriptions in there, but it's something that you can work on and improve over and over again, but you can get it pretty good to start with. And stalk people sounds terrible, but do your research. Like, go see what other people are doing, the successful sellers in your niche. Don't be afraid to go see what they're doing. Not because you're going to steal it, but because you'll probably find they're all doing something pretty similar, and you'll probably pick up threads of similarity between them, like the sort of photos they might be taking or the descriptions they're writing, their policies, as I said, their about page, all of that stuff is working obviously for them. So don't be afraid to go and see what they're doing and then reinterpret that for yourself. But we all learn from other people. It's just normal, it's natural, it's how it should be. As long as we don't take things verbatim, word for word, as long as we give them our own spin and our own personality and our own branding, then it's just smart business to go and do that. So while I'm still here, has anybody got any last questions for me? Please do pop them in right now. And while I'm talking about that, I'm going to give you a few little things you can go do to learn more about this. So obviously head on over to createandthrive.com, my website, and I've got years and years worth of blog posts and podcasts on all things handmade business over there. If you want to get access to that Handmade Biz Toolkit, go to handmadebiztoolkit.com and pop your email in to join our Create and Thrive community, and you'll get access to a whole bunch of downloadables and ebooks from there. And most importantly, if you really want some help and support with this, I am running Setup Shop. I think I mentioned it earlier. It's one of my flagship courses. I've been running it since 2013. Obviously, there were some updates along the way, and almost 1,000 people have taken this course, and it's helped them set up their shop. So it's not Etsy specific. This today was really Etsy specific, although a lot of it does kind of go for whatever platform you want to do. But if you want to start or revamp your online shop specifically, then that's what Setup Shop's all about. It's 30 days from go to woe, and I take you through every single step. So as I was saying, I think it was it you said? Yeah, Sarah earlier asked about the checklist. Like, every single lesson covers one of these areas in detail, and you have an action step and something to do for that. And we have a group where we all work together as well. So that's a really good course to do, and it's affordable. The price will be up soon, but you can go pop your email in over at createandthrive.com/setup shop, and I'll let you know when the course is open. Lakshmi has a question for me. Do you have any tips for getting found on Etsy lately? The traffic seems to have changed. This is always difficult. I've been on Etsy for, like I said, almost 10 years now. And in that entire time, all the time, I see people saying this. The traffic has dropped off. My traffic's disappeared. Have they changed something? They probably have. They change stuff all the time. And this is why working out how to get people to your Etsy shop is never done and dusted. It's always an experiment. A few things that have always worked for me is, making sure I have a lot of products, enough products in there, working on maybe sometimes changing them up a little bit, changing titles and tags, doing a bit of keyword research if things aren't being found, renewing. I still renew, and actually in the Thriver Circle is my membership site for makers, thrivercircle.com if you want to check it out. We're actually doing the Etsy renewal project this month. So a whole bunch of us have set a target, so how many items we're renewing each day, and we're doing it every day for February because we want to get to the bottom of this does renewing still work thing. So we're doing that experiment at the moment, and obviously we'll be talking about that in the circle and the results that we've had. Some people it seems to be working for, some people it doesn't seem to be working so well for, so that's really interesting. Renewing used to be a really good strategy because that's how Etsy search used to be based on recency, so how often something was listed. but obviously it's way more complicated now. I mean, they have an AI search thing now, and I don't think anybody really has a really good grasp of how it works, except for the people in Etsy, obviously. And that's deliberate. They don't want people to be able to game the system. Same as Google, they're never going to release all of the details of the algorithm. The best we can do is experiment and try. But of course, getting off Etsy and driving traffic that way, Pinterest is really a good idea. Pin all of your products to Pinterest. Join group boards on Pinterest. There's heaps of Etsy seller group boards and handmade business seller group boards on on Pinterest. So if you pin your stuff to Pinterest, share it on those group boards, you'll get a lot more traction and you'll get your stuff out there in front of a lot more people. I actually think going forward, especially what's been happening with Facebook and Instagram, I would strongly recommend that you focus your energies on Pinterest going forward, because that is really, it's not a social media per se, but it is a shopping mecca. Like, people go there to plan their weddings, to plan parties, to collect products they might want to buy, clothes, whatever else that they might like. Basically, people go on there to curate their perfect life. And if you can be part of that, then they might buy from you, but you have to be there. So take the time, once you get your photos right, to go and pin them all on Pinterest. And like I said, if you don't have a lot of traction on Pinterest already, joining group boards is a really good way of getting a product out in front of a whole bunch more people a lot more quickly. So that would be a big tip for me. Like, some of my products have been pinned thousands, like one thing has been repinned thousands of times on Pinterest, and it's a big driver of traffic to all of my websites, to be honest, but my Etsy shop definitely as well. And another really good thing to do, thinking outside of the just being on Etsy box, is PR, man. Contact bloggers, contact influencers, and ask them if they'll share your stuff. Like, remember, design bloggers, fashion bloggers, whatever, they're always looking for new, fresh products. So whatever industry you're in, get your stuff out there in front of people that way as well is another really good way of driving traffic. We can work on Etsy itself a lot, doing all of this stuff I just mentioned, working on that search engine optimization. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to do the work to drive traffic, as well as relying on the traffic Etsy brings to us. And it's a never-ending story. So there's no one easy right answer there, but I do highly recommend the Pinterest thing. Yeah. Okay. I think I might wrap things up there. If you have any final questions after I finish up, don't be afraid to pop them in the comments. I'll be very happy to answer them for you. And keep your, if you don't already like the Create Thrive Facebook page, head on over and do that, because I'm going to be doing these live workshops now and again. And I also share other videos and the podcast and everything else that'll help you to get your handmade business to the point where you want it to be. So thank you so much, everybody who came along live. It was really lovely to see you today, and everybody who watched the replay as well. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know, what's your number one takeaway from this? What's the one thing that's really stuck in your mind that has gone, oh yeah, I need to do that. I'm going to go do that today or tomorrow or next week. Soon, I'm going to go do that. Let me know what that number one takeaway is. I'd really love to hear about it. Sarah, you're very welcome. Lakshmi, you're very welcome. Glad you found the Pinterest stuff useful. And I will see you guys all very soon. And if you're in the Thriver Circle, obviously, I'll see you next week for our private Facebook Live that we're having over in the Thriver Circle. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely day. Bye.